So to finish this section, let's see how we can calculate the midpoint between point A and point B. So in order to do this, we are going to go back to our float 3 and let's first create our midpoint. And so in here we need to cast our point A and point B, so their position, as float 3 so that we can add them together and then divide by 2 so we get the average point. So let's start by point A dot position, which is going to be a float 3. And here we can add to this our point B. So what this is going to do is to add x, y, and z together. And then we can take all of this and divide it by 2. And that's going to be our average point. How easy was that? Now, we want to create another little sphere, so I guess I can just reuse this here. So let mid geometry and mid node. Okay, so I'm going to make this a little bit smaller actually, so it's going to be a 3, and our mid geometry dot diffuse. So I'm going to make this red basically. So our first material dot diffuse dot contents, there we go, equals, so UI color dot red. Oh, also I said I would make the arrow slightly transparent, so what I can do is very quickly go in there and my pyramid here. So two ways to do this really. So either the color could be say 80%, something like this, so that's going to be see-through slightly, or if we go back to 100% like this, you can also change the opacity here to 0.8. Exactly the same thing in the end. Okay, so that's just because I forgot to do this before. Right, okay, so let's go back to our mid node. So we now have our geometry, so we can add this to our scene view. So scene view dot scene dot root node dot add child node, and this is going to be our mid node, which doesn't really mean much, so I'm going to rename this. To be fair, that's not a great name, so rename midpoint node, and here this is going to be a midpoint geometry. Okay, slightly better, so let's just make some space. Okay, where are we? There. Okay, so midpoint is done. Now we want to add some text to this, and we are going to do this using the SCN text. So let's create this geometry first. Let geo, oh, by the way, I completely forgot, but we have calculated our midpoint here, but we didn't actually assign this position to our node. So midpoint node dot position, and in here I can add an SCN vector3 make as usual, and that's going to be obviously so midpoint, which is a float 3, but it will work just as well. So x, y, and z. So midpoint, not the node, just the point dot y, and here midpoint dot z. Right. Okay, so it's now in place. Excellent. Let's take care of our text. So let text geometry equals, so an SCN text. So SCN text will take a string, which is going to be our, so we need to do a bit of conversion here really, because we don't want to have a 0.387 etc etc. What we want is a string that's going to take a format. So I'm going to format my string. Where are we? So the format is going to be a string format, and that's going to take obviously our D here. The D is going to be multiplied by 100. So now we are in centimeters, and I'm going to add directly here centimeters. So there's obviously lots you can do about this. If you want to convert to feet, inches, kilometers, whatever you want, feel free. I'm going to just keep this as centimeters, but yeah, feel free to update as much as you want. So in here, what I want to do is the format, which is going to be 0f. So I don't want any commas basically. So the minimum the minimum accuracy that we will have will be to the centimeter. I don't think we need to go 0.5 to 1 centimeter. I don't think it is really that accurate. Augmented reality measuring is good, but I don't think that it is for very accurate measurements. Not yet, at least. Okay, so the last thing we need for our text is the extrusion depth. So this is how deep, how fat the text is going to be. I'm just going to put 1 in there. Right, so now that we have our text geometry, we can create a text node. So let text node equals SCN node, which takes a geometry, which is our text geometry. Good. And I don't know if you remember or if we've seen this before, but I think we have text. Text is absolutely huge. So if we look at text in here, you see I've got my AR text, which is AR sized. But look, if I add some text and zoom out, this is my text. You see the difference between this, which is 20 centimeters, and that, which is, well, 64 meters. It is a lot. It is really a lot. So I need to scale this down here, you see. So I would have probably a 0.01 and do it again and again and again. So I do recommend that you set up your own text and then do something like this. So if I add my AR text in there, whoops, you can see how this is sized for AR. So at 1% of the size basically. Right, so let's just remove those two. That's just for me to show you, but as we're doing this in code, here I can change the scale basically of my text node. So text node.scale equals, and in here, so same again, we need to get some SCN vector make. So SCN vector 3 make, and that's going to be 0.01. Actually, it's going to be 0.05 because it is really quite small actually. This, and in here I'm going to double this, so here that's going to be 1. All right, the scale is done. So one more thing that we can do is to change the flatness of our text node, so our text geometry, sorry, so text geometry dot flatness. So the flatness is basically going to return basically the quality of your text. So feel free to comment this out and check the difference, but basically here the flatness I'm going to put 0.2. If you go towards 0, you get a much better quality, and if you go towards 1, you get not so good quality basically of text. All right, and that's, I think, all we need here. So I'm going to add this text to my midpoint node here directly, so that it's centered in on the line. So if I call my midpoint node dot add child node, and here I'm going to add my text node. All right, so let's see how this looks, and then we'll talk about this little surprise there. This is a bit blurry, but no, okay, this works now. So here, if I add 1 and 2, you can see now how it's adding my 30 centimeters. And for some reason, this is not red. Not sure what I missed there. Midpoint geometry, first material. Oh, it should work. Weird. Okay, but you can see how, yeah, this text looks really good. However, it doesn't move, right? So if I look from here, I can't actually read any of this, and this is going to be my little surprise there. So if I do this 16, and actually let's just measure this. So if I come a bit closer, so the whole thing about getting some accurate or to put the points exactly where you want, you need to move really, and you need to give the camera as much information as possible, and that means basically triangulating the points. So you see here, I can move around and now add a point, and ARKit understands a little bit better that it is exactly there. But if I just do this, it might not actually kind of work there. But yeah, now you see it's not exactly placed where I want it to go. It's good to, for example, so if I go into this corner here and triangulate by looking around it, then ARKit gets a lot better information about the 3D space and understands that, oh, hello. So yeah, 119 centimeters there. Excellent. But yeah, once we move, I want to be able to see and to read those labels and this text all the time. So let's just stop this. And my little surprise here is to call some billboard constraints. So basically this means that the text is always going to be in front of, it's always going to appear facing the camera. So to do this, we need to call some constraints. So let constraints, yeah, equals scn. And here you've got billboard, stop, billboard constraints. Like this. So we'll just call that, and then those constraints, we can then say that the free axis is all of them. And finally, I'm going to add this to my midpoint. So if I call, yeah, it is to the midpoint node. So midpoint node dot constraints equals constraints. There we go. So the surprise was basically billboard constraints. There you go, and that should, so it didn't work. What's going on? Constraints, can I assign value of constraints? Oh, yes, sorry. So this needs to be inside of an array, which is not those curly brackets, but the square ones. So this, yeah, this you need to pass an array of constraints. Obviously, we only have one constraint here, but it still needs to be into an array. Let's run, move around a little bit, and if I add my first point and my second point, you can see now 35 centimeters, and if I move, I can always see exactly how much this is. Very powerful stuff. I did make an error about this midpoint, so let's just go back to this real quick and see what have I done wrong. So in here, yeah, I added the wrong geometry here. So what I need is my midpoint geometry. So midpoint geometry. This is working, and yeah, that looks much better. So now we have our red dot in the middle, our 25 centimeters or 12, and as we rotate, we can see, I think it's quite good to have this midpoint that aims at, you know, that stays next to the measurement here, so we can understand that this is a midpoint and not just one of those normal points. 5 centimeters. Actually, how big is a MacBook? So let's just have a look there. So from here to about there. So you see how I triangulate there, and that gives me a 29 centimeter keyboard. All right. Wow. Well done. Seriously, you've achieved quite a lot in this section. It was a bit longer than usual. Hopefully, my mumbling made sense, and yeah, well done on completing this section. I hope you've learned a ton. If you have any questions, obviously don't hesitate to add some comments or questions. One more thing, actually, you may have noticed that this does not work. And this is because I called the wrong one. It's not will rotate, but did rotate. So if I call did rotate, and there you have it. So the view.center is going to be re-centered after the rotation and not before the rotation, otherwise nothing's going to happen. And that should fix the slight issue we had if we go to a landscape. See you in the next section.